What happens when the most patient species in the galaxy finally loses its temper? For 3 centuries, humanity extended olive branches across the stars. They shared technology freely, offered medical aid without conditions, and turned the other cheek when alien civilizations spat in their faces. The Galactic Council dismissed them as weak pacifists, useful only for their resources and innovations. Pirates raided human colonies with impunity. Slavers captured human children for exotic markets. Warlords burned human settlements for sport. Through it all, humanity warned them, politely, with infinite patience. "We are not as weak as you believe," the human ambassadors would say, their voices calm even as footage of massacred colonies played on the council screens. "Please reconsider your actions." The galaxy laughed, but there's an old human saying that the galaxy should have remembered: beware the fury of a patient man. Because when humanity finally stopped being patient, when they finally stopped offering warnings and started delivering consequences, the galaxy discovered a truth that would echo through the stars for millennia, and they gave everyone fair warning. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the towering obsidian spires of the Galactic Council chambers, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air of Nexus Prime. 300 years of human diplomacy had led to this moment, and she carried the weight of her species' final message in a simple datapad clutched against her chest. The massive doors, carved from the fossilized remains of some ancient leviathan, groaned open with hydraulic precision. Inside, representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated alcoves, their forms ranging from the crystalline beauty of the Zephyrians to the writhing tentacles of the deep space Crocori. At the center of it all sat the Council of Five, the self-appointed rulers of known space. Sarah's footsteps echoed in the vast chamber as she walked toward the speaker's platform. Whispers followed her path, some curious, most dismissive. The human delegation had requested this emergency session, but few expected anything more than another formal complaint about raided colonies or violated treaties. "The human representative will state her business," announced Overlord Vexhai, his 6 arms gesturing with practiced authority. The hegemony leader's chitinous face showed no emotion, but Sarah had learned to read the subtle twitches in his mandibles. He was amused. Sarah stepped onto the platform, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes upon her. The translation matrix hummed to life, ready to broadcast her words across the galaxy in real time. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to unleash. "For 3 centuries, humanity has sought peaceful coexistence with all species represented here. We have offered our technology freely, provided medical aid during plagues, and opened our worlds to refugees from countless conflicts." A ripple of bored acknowledgement passed through the chamber. This was familiar territory, human weakness disguised as diplomacy. "During this time," Sarah continued, "we have endured systematic persecution. Our colonies have been raided by Corvan pirates with official sanction. Our children have been taken by Etherian slavers and sold in markets on your core worlds. Our research stations have been destroyed by hegemony forces for sport." Overlord Vexahay's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. The human speaks of persecution, yet her species multiplies across the galaxy like a plague. Perhaps if humans defended themselves adequately, such incidents would not occur. Sarah didn't flinch. She had expected this response. Each time these atrocities occurred, we brought formal complaints to this council. Each time we were told that these were isolated incidents or matters of internal species politics. Each time we accepted your explanations and continued our policy of peaceful coexistence. "Because humans are weak," hissed Representative Slithara of the Serpentine Collective. Her forked tongue tasted the air with satisfaction. "You hide behind words because you lack the strength to act. We gave you warnings," Sarah said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, yet somehow carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. 300 years of warnings. We told you repeatedly that our patience, while vast, was not infinite." The chamber fell silent. Something in Sarah's tone had shifted, carrying an undertone that even the most primitive species recognized instinctively. "Danger. 2 weeks ago," Sarah continued, "the Corvan raider fleet attacked the human colony of Haven's Rest. They killed 14,000 civilians, including 3,000 children. When the survivors sent distress calls, the local hegemony forces not only refused aid but demanded payment for rescue services. Overlord Vexhai waved a dismissive arm. Corvin affairs are not the concern of this council. If humans cannot protect the children were used as target practice. Sarah's words cut through the chamber like a blade. The raiders broadcast their massacre across pirate networks as entertainment. They made our children's suffering into a game. An uncomfortable shifting passed through some of the more civilized species delegations, but the major powers remained unmoved. "Regrettable," said Prime Mystic Etherlon of the Cosmic Enlightenment. His crystalline form pulsed with what appeared to be mild sympathy. "But such is the nature of existence, the strong take from the weak. It has always been so." "Yes, it has always been so." She reached into her diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small device no larger than her palm. "This is why humanity has decided to embrace this universal truth." Security forces throughout the chamber tensed, but their scanners showed nothing threatening about the device. Sarah placed it gently on the speaker's podium. "For 3 centuries we have been the galaxy's physicians, teachers, and peacemakers. We healed your plagues, educated your young, and mediated your conflicts. We did this not because we were weak, but because we believed in something better." Sarah's voice grew stronger with each word. "You have taught us that we were wrong." The device on the podium began to glow with a soft blue light. Holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing star charts, fleet positions, and technical schematics that made several species representatives gasp in recognition. "These are the current positions of every major military fleet in the galaxy," Sarah announced. "Real-time tracking through quantum entanglement markers that we gifted to you over the centuries. Every ship you possess, every station you've built, every weapon you've pointed at human worlds, we know exactly where they are." The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. 3 centuries of human gifts, medical supplies, technological components, educational materials, suddenly took on a sinister new meaning. Overlord Vexhai rose from his throne, his 6 arms spreading in a gesture of fury. "You dare spy on the great powers? You dare violate the sacred trust of diplomatic exchange?" Sarah laughed, and the sound was colder than the void between stars. "Sacred trust? You burned our children alive and called it entertainment. You sold our families into slavery and called it commerce. You destroyed our worlds and called it the natural order." The holographic displays shifted, showing detailed schematics of every major species' military technology. Ships, weapons, defensive systems, all laid bare with precision that spoke of intimate knowledge. "Every piece of technology in your fleets contains elements of human innovation," Sarah continued. "We freely shared our advances in metallurgy, energy systems, and computational networks. What we didn't share was that every component has a quantum signature that we can track, analyze, and," she paused for effect, "influence." The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted accusations, demanded explanations, and called for Sarah's immediate arrest. But the human ambassador stood calmly in the eye of the storm, her presence somehow commanding attention despite the mayhem around her. "Order!" Overlord Vexhai's voice boomed through the chamber's amplification systems. "Order in this chamber!" As the noise died down, Sarah spoke again. "You wanted to know what happens when humans stop being weak. You are about to find out." The holographic displays changed once more, now showing real-time footage from across the galaxy. Human fleets were emerging from seemingly empty space, their ships bearing designs that no alien intelligence had ever seen. These weren't the peaceful exploration vessels or lightly armed transports that humanity had always displayed. These were weapons of war, sleek and deadly, moving with precision that spoke of long preparation. "Where did you get those ships?" demanded Admiral Kretak of the Void Hunters. His scaled features showed the first hint of genuine concern. "Our intelligence networks show no human military construction of this scale." Sarah smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "You only saw what we wanted you to see." For 3 centuries, while we played the role of peaceful explorers, humanity has been preparing. Hidden shipyards in dark space, manufacturing facilities inside hollow asteroids, research stations disguised as mining operations. The displays showed system after system where human forces were taking position. Not attacking, not yet, but positioning themselves with strategic precision that demonstrated intimate knowledge of every species' weaknesses. The Corvan raider fleet that attacked Haven's Rest, Sarah continued, was completely destroyed 17 hours ago. No survivors, no escape pods. Nothing remains but debris and a message beacon broadcasting a simple warning: this is what happens to those who harm human children. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The Corvan Raider fleet had been one of the most feared military forces in the Outer Rim, 12 dreadnoughts and over 200 support vessels, crewed by some of the most vicious warriors in known space. "Impossible," whispered Representative Thane of the Corvan clans. The fleet was invincible. They had shields that could deflect any weapon, armor that could withstand stellar bombardment, shields and armor that contained human-designed quantum mesh stabilizers, Sarah replied calmly. Technology we graciously shared during your last military upgrade cycle. Technology that we can destabilize with a simple command pulse. Every species present had accepted human technological assistance at some point, their weapons, their shields, their life support systems, all potentially compromised. Prime Mystic Etherlon's crystalline form flickered with what might have been fear. Surely you don't intend to use this advantage against civilian populations. That would make you no better than the raiders you condemned. Sarah's expression softened slightly. We have no quarrel with civilians. Our conflict is with governments that have sanctioned attacks on our people and military forces that have carried out those attacks. However, her voice hardened again, any civilian population that continues to support or shelter those responsible will be considered complicit. You threaten genocide, accused Overlord Vexaihi. This council will not permit such actions. We have treaties, protocols. The combined fleet will... Sarah interrupted, currently has 37% of its critical systems compromised by human technology. If you activate your forces against us, you'll discover that your ships have a tendency to suffer catastrophic failures at very inconvenient moments. She gestured to the holographic displays, which now showed detailed breakdowns of every major fleet's vulnerabilities. The information was overwhelming in its completeness. Humanity had spent 3 centuries mapping every weakness, every flaw, every point of failure in galactic military infrastructure. "This is blackmail," snarled Representative Morgoth of the Blood Legion. "You hold the galaxy hostage with your deception and threaten us with our own weapons." Sarah shook her head. "This is justice. For 300 years you have taken advantage of our desire for peace. You have mistaken our restraint for weakness, our diplomacy for cowardice. We warned you repeatedly that there would be consequences for your actions. The chamber's environmental system seemed to have grown colder, though the temperature readings remained constant. Something in the air itself felt different, charged with potential violence. "What do you want?" asked Prime Mystic Etherlon. His crystalline form had dimmed significantly, betraying his fear despite his attempts at composure. Sarah reached into her diplomatic pouch again, withdrawing a sealed document. These are humanity's final terms for peaceful coexistence. They are non-negotiable. She activated the chamber's central display system, and the document's contents appeared for all to see. The terms were simple, stark, and absolute. First, all human colonies, stations, and vessels were to be considered sovereign territory, inviolate under galactic law. Second, any attack on human civilians would result in the complete destruction of the attacking force and its supporting infrastructure. Third, the slave trade in human beings would cease immediately, with all current human slaves returned within 30 standard days. Fourth, reparations would be paid to human colonies that had suffered attacks calculated at full replacement value plus compensation for loss of life. Fifth, The Galactic Council would formally recognize humanity's right to enforce these terms through military action. The chamber exploded in outrage. Representatives shouted over each other, their voices creating a cacophony of indignation, fear, and fury. But beneath it all, a cold calculation was taking place. Each species was rapidly assessing their military capabilities against the revelations of human technological infiltration. "These terms are impossible," declared Overlord Vexhai. "No species has the right to dictate terms to the entire galaxy." "Every species that has harmed our people had the right to do so," Sarah replied. "You established that precedent yourselves. We're simply embracing the same philosophy, the strong take from the weak." It has always been so. Admiral Kretak of the Void Hunters had been studying the displayed technical specifications with growing alarm. Even if your claims about technological compromise are true, you lack the numbers to enforce such demands. Humanity has perhaps 50 worlds and a few hundred ships. The combined fleet alone has over 10,000 vessels. Sarah's smile returned, cold and predatory. "You're thinking in terms of traditional warfare, Admiral. Ship against ship, fleet against fleet. That's not how humans wage war when we're truly committed to victory." The holographic display shifted again, showing new images that sent a chill through even the most warlike species present. Human ships were approaching critical infrastructure throughout the galaxy: communication, relays, power generation stations, food production facilities, medical centers, not attacking but positioning themselves with surgical precision. "You see, we learned something important during our centuries of peace," Sarah continued. "Modern civilization is fragile. It depends on constant supply chains, uninterrupted communication networks, and stable infrastructure. Remove those supports and the mightiest empire becomes helpless within weeks." The implications were staggering. Every species in the chamber depended on the galaxy-spanning infrastructure that had developed over millennia. Trade routes, communication networks, energy distribution systems. All of it had been built with human assistance and was now potentially under human control. Representative Slathara's serpentine form coiled tightly, a defensive posture her species adopted when facing mortal threat. "You would collapse galactic civilization to satisfy your revenge?" "We would preserve human civilization," Sarah corrected. "Your civilization is no longer our concern. You made that clear when you turned our children into target practice." The chamber fell silent as the full scope of humanity's position became clear. They weren't threatening traditional military conquest, they were threatening to pull the foundation out from under galactic society itself. Prime Mystic Ether Lan's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been resignation. "How long do we have to consider your terms?" Sarah checked her wrist chronometer with casual precision. "The ultimatum was delivered simultaneously to all major governments 6 hours ago. You have 18 hours remaining to provide formal acceptance. After that time expires, humanity will begin enforcement actions." "And if we refuse?" asked Overlord Vex's High, though his mandibles betrayed the fear his voice tried to hide. Sarah's expression didn't change, but her words carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Then you'll discover what happens when the most patient species in the galaxy finally loses its temper. We gave you fair warning for 3 centuries. Now there will be no mercy." She turned and began walking toward the chamber's exit, her footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. As she reached the massive doors, she paused and looked back at the assembled representatives. "Oh, and one more thing," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the vast space. "The quantum tracking system in your technology? It's not just for monitoring your positions. Every piece of human-influenced technology in your infrastructure has a remote termination protocol. We've been very patient about not using it." The doors closed behind her with a finality that seemed to echo through the chamber long after the sound had faded. The Galactic Council sat in stunned silence, each species rapidly calculating the cost of defiance against the price of submission. For 300 years, they had dismissed humanity as weak. In 18 hours, they would learn the difference between weakness and restraint. And across the galaxy, human fleets continued their silent positioning, patient as death itself, waiting for their answer. Admiral Marcus Stone stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the tactical display paint the hegemony's home system in hostile red. Around him, the largest human fleet ever assembled waited in perfect formation, their ships bearing names that spoke of humanity's long memory: justice, vengeance, heaven's rest, and dozens more honoring fallen colonies. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Commander Nash from the communication station, "we're receiving priority transmissions from the Galactic Council chambers. They're intense, sir." Stone didn't take his eyes off the display. "Let me guess, they want to negotiate. Actually, sir, they're demanding our immediate withdrawal. Overlord Vexahai is calling this an act of unprovoked aggression and threatening to mobilize the combined fleet." A cold smile played across Stone's weathered features. Unprovoked. That's interesting terminology for someone who just authorized the massacre of 14,000 civilians. He turned to face his communications officer. "What's our timetable, Nash?" 16 hours and 43 minutes until the ultimatum expires, sir." Stone nodded and activated the fleet-wide communication system. His image appeared on screens throughout the assembled armada, over 300 ships of designs that had never been seen by alien eyes, each one a masterpiece of human engineering and determination. "Fleet commanders," Stone's voice carried the weight of 3 centuries of accumulated grievance. "You've all seen the intelligence reports from Haven's Rest. You've read the casualty lists. You know what happened to those children." His voice hardened. "In 16 hours and 43 minutes, the galaxy will learn that humanity remembers its dead." The bridge crew maintained their professional composure, but Stone could see the cold fury burning behind their eyes. Every person in the fleet had lost someone to alien aggression, family members sold into slavery, friends killed in raids, entire communities wiped out for the entertainment of species that considered humans to be inferior. "Captain Torres," Stone addressed the commander of the stealth reconnaissance vessel Shadow, "what's the status of your infiltration teams?" Captain Elena Torres materialized on the main screen, her ship invisible to alien sensors while positioned deep inside hegemony space. "All teams are in position, Admiral. We have operatives inside every major hegemony installation from here to their core worlds. The quantum disruptors are ready for activation on your command." Goes to Stone felt a moment of professional pride. The infiltration had taken decades to accomplish, human agents slowly working their way into positions throughout alien infrastructure. They had been dismissed as harmless administrators, maintenance workers, and technical advisors, while gradually gaining access to the most critical systems in galactic civilization. "Commander Park," Stone turned to his tactical officer, a veteran of the secret human military buildup. "Status on the combined fleet's response." Commander Sarah Park consulted her displays with practiced efficiency. "They're mobilizing, sir, but slowly. Our intelligence suggests they still don't fully comprehend the scope of the threat. Most species are treating this as a typical diplomatic crisis rather than an existential challenge." "Their mistake," Stone replied. He activated his personal communication link to Earth Command. "Admiral Stone to Command. Request permission to demonstrate our capabilities." The response came immediately, carrying the authority of the Human Defense Council and the weight of 3 centuries of patience finally exhausted. "Permission granted, Admiral. Show them what they've been ignoring." Stone turned to his weapons officer, Lieutenant Commander Chen, a woman whose parents had died in a Corvin raid 20 years earlier. "Commander Chen, select a target that will get their attention without causing unnecessary civilian casualties." Chen's fingers danced across her console with deadly precision. "I recommend the Hegemony Fortress at Kethvar, sir. It's a military installation with minimal civilian presence, but strategically vital to their Outer Rim operations." "Perfect. All ships prepare for demonstration of force." Target: Kethvar Fortress. Weapons free. The human fleet moved with a coordination that would have impressed even their enemies. Ships that had been dispersed across the system suddenly converged with mathematical precision, their formation optimized for maximum firepower concentration. Kethvar Fortress had stood for over 2,000 years, an impregnable bastion that had never fallen to enemy attack. Its shields could deflect the combined firepower of an entire battle fleet, and its weapons could destroy anything that came within range. The hegemony considered it absolutely invulnerable. They had forgotten that its shield generators contained human-designed quantum mesh stabilizers. "Fleet is in position, Admiral," reported Commander Park. "All ships report ready." Stone stood straighter, feeling the weight of history settling on his shoulders. Fire. The combined firepower of 300 human warships struck HFY Fortress simultaneously, but the devastating attack was only the beginning. As the fortress's shields flared under the bombardment, Chen activated the quantum disruptors hidden within the shield generators themselves. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The fortress's shields didn't just fail, they collapsed inward, creating a feedback loop that turned the installation's own defensive systems into weapons of self-destruction. Within seconds, one of the most powerful military installations in the galaxy had been reduced to expanding debris. "Target destroyed, Admiral," reported Commander Park, though her tone suggested she found the result almost anticlimactic. Total time from firing to complete destruction: 14 seconds. Stone nodded grimly. 14 seconds to destroy something that had been considered invincible. The demonstration would send shockwaves throughout the galaxy, but more importantly, it would save lives by showing exactly what humanity was capable of when pushed beyond endurance. "All ships resume holding positions," Stone ordered. "Communications, open a channel to the Galactic Council chambers." Within moments, the chaos of the council chambers filled the Retribution's main screen. Representatives from dozens of species were shouting at each other in a cacophony of fear and fury. At the center of it all, Overlord Vex High was gesticulating wildly with all 6 arms while demanding immediate military response.
"Attention, Galactic Council!" Stone's voice cut through the chaos like a blade.
"This is Admiral Marcus Stone of the Human Defense Fleet. I believe you just witnessed our demonstration." The chamber fell silent as alien eyes turned toward the communication screens. Stone could see the fear in their expressions, the sudden understanding that their comfortable assumptions about human weakness had been catastrophically wrong. "The destruction of HFY Fortress was a demonstration of our capabilities," Stone continued, his voice calm and professional despite the magnitude of what had just occurred. "We could have targeted your core worlds, your civilian populations, or your leadership facilities. We chose a military target to minimize loss of life while making our position clear."
Overlord Vex High's mandibles clicked furiously as he stepped forward.
"This is an act of war, human. The combined fleet will—" "The combined fleet," Stone interrupted, "currently has 37% of its critical systems compromised by human technology. If you attempt to mobilize against us, you'll discover that your ships have an unfortunate tendency to suffer explosive decompression at the worst possible moments." To demonstrate his point, Stone nodded to Commander Chen, who activated a carefully prepared display. The screens throughout the council chamber showed real-time internal schematics of major combined fleet vessels. Critical systems highlighted in red showed the locations of human-influenced technology, each one a potential point of failure. "We've had 3 centuries to study your military capabilities," Stone explained. "Every alliance, every arms deal, every technological exchange has been cataloged and analyzed. We know which ships can fight and which will fail when pushed. We know which commanders will stand and which will flee. Most importantly, we know exactly how to bring your entire military infrastructure to its knees without firing another shot." The display changed again, showing the current positions of human fleets throughout the galaxy. The tactical situation was overwhelming. Humanity had positioned forces to strike at every critical point simultaneously, while remaining largely invisible to alien detection systems. Prime Mystic Etherlon's crystalline form flickered with patterns of distress. "How is this possible? Our intelligence networks showed no human military buildup of this magnitude." Stone allowed himself a cold smile. "Your intelligence network saw exactly what we wanted them to see. 3 centuries of careful misdirection, hidden construction, and patient preparation. While you dismissed us as peaceful explorers, we were building the most advanced military force in galactic history." The truth was even more complex than Stone revealed. Humanity's military buildup had been compartmentalized across thousands of seemingly innocent operations. Mining asteroids that were actually hollow manufacturing facilities, research stations that were actually weapons testing ranges, exploration fleets that were actually reconnaissance missions mapping every military installation in known space. But why? Asked Representative Thane of the Corvin clans, his scaled features showing genuine confusion. Why build such capabilities if you truly desired peace? Stone's expression hardened. Because we learned that peace is only possible when you're strong enough to enforce it. You taught us that lesson with every raid on our colonies, every human sold into slavery, every child murdered for entertainment. The communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Stone glanced at the tactical display and saw new developments that would change everything. "Admiral," reported Commander Park, "we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Human fleets are taking position around major infrastructure nodes. The demonstration at Kethvar has triggered widespread panic in civilian populations." Stone frowned. Civilian panic had not been part of the plan. "Clarify, Commander." "Multiple species are evacuating their core worlds, sir. They believe we're preparing for a large-scale bombardment of population centers." This was exactly what humanity wanted to avoid. The goal was to force political change, not to terrorize innocent populations who had no control over their government's actions. Stone reopened the communication channel to the council chambers. "Representatives of the Galactic Council, it appears there has been some misunderstanding about our intentions. Humanity has no desire to harm civilian populations. Our quarrel is with governments that have sanctioned attacks on human colonies and military forces that have carried out those attacks."
Overlord Vexhai seized on what he perceived as weakness.
"Then you admit your position is unsustainable. You cannot maintain this level of military deployment indefinitely, and you dare not attack civilian targets for fear of becoming the monsters you claim to oppose." Stone studied the hegemony leader with the patience of a predator. "You're partially correct. We have no intention of attacking civilians. However, you seem to misunderstand our strategic position." He gestured to Commander Chen, who activated a new display showing industrial and infrastructure targets throughout hegemony space. Military shipyards, weapon manufacturing facilities, communication relay stations, and supply depots, all highlighted in red. "We don't need to attack your civilians to bring your civilization to its knees," Stone explained. "Modern society depends on complex supply chains and communication networks. Disrupt those systems, and your military becomes ineffective within days. Your economy collapses within weeks. Your government loses all authority within months." The implications struck the assembled representatives like a physical blow. They had built their civilization on the assumption of stability, never considering how vulnerable their infrastructure had become to coordinated attack. "This is economic warfare," accused Admiral Kretak of the Void Hunters. "You threaten to reduce entire species to pre-technological barbarism. We threaten to reduce species that attack our people to a level where they can no longer pose a threat," Stone corrected. "The choice of how far that reduction goes is entirely up to you." Representative Slethara of the Serpentine Collective coiled tighter as the full scope of humanity's strategy became clear. "Even if you could achieve such destruction, the cost would be enormous. Billions would die in the resulting chaos, including humans living in alien territories." Stone's expression softened slightly, showing a hint of the moral struggle that lay beneath his military professionalism. "We've spent considerable effort identifying and evacuating human populations from potentially affected areas. As for alien civilians, we've prepared humanitarian aid packages that can be deployed immediately to minimize suffering." The revelation that humanity had been quietly evacuating its people while simultaneously preparing for war added another layer of shock to the Council's understanding. The planning and coordination required was staggering, suggesting a level of long-term strategic thinking that no species had credited humans with possessing. "How long?" asked Prime Mystic Etherlon, his crystalline form dim with defeat. "How long have you been planning this?" Stone considered the question carefully. Active planning began 147 years ago, after the massacre at New Geneva. That was when we realized that diplomatic protests and economic sanctions would never be sufficient to protect our people. New Geneva had been a human research colony focused on developing new medical technologies. Corvan raiders had attacked it not for resources or strategic advantage, but simply because they were bored. 3,000 researchers and their families had been killed, their work destroyed, their sacrifice forgotten by a galaxy that considered such events routine. 147 years, repeated Overlord Vexhay, his mandibles clicking with what might have been admiration or terror. You've been preparing this for 147 years. Longer if you count the preliminary analysis phase, Stone confirmed. We've been studying every aspect of galactic civilization since first contact, cataloging strengths and weaknesses, mapping supply chains and communication networks. We know your societies better than you know them yourselves. The communication system chimed again with another priority message. Commander Park reviewed the incoming data with growing concern. Admiral, we're receiving reports that several species are attempting to activate their emergency military protocols. It appears they're trying to implement a coordinated defense against our forces. Stone nodded. This had been anticipated. Activate Operation Looking Glass, Commander Chen. Chen's fingers moved across her console with deadly precision. Throughout the galaxy, human agents who had been positioned inside alien military installations for decades, the results were immediate and decisive. On the council chamber screens, real-time reports began flooding in from across known space. Military installations were suffering cascading system failures, communication networks were going dark, supply convoys were mysteriously disappearing. The carefully coordinated response that the alien governments had attempted to organize was falling apart before it could begin. "This is impossible," whispered Admiral Kretok, his scaled features showing disbelief. "No species could coordinate operations of this magnitude across such distances. No species you understand could coordinate such operations," Stone corrected. "But you never bothered to truly understand humanity. You saw what you expected to see. Peaceful explorers who could be exploited without consequence. The truth was that humanity's coordination capabilities were based on quantum communication technologies that they had never shared with alien species. While alien governments struggled with communication delays across interstellar distances, human forces could coordinate in real time across the entire galaxy. What you're witnessing," Stone continued, "is the result of 147 years of careful preparation, combined with technologies that you assumed we didn't possess. Every human agent in place, every hidden facility, every concealed weapon, all of it activated simultaneously with perfect coordination. Thousands of human agents, tens of thousands of hidden weapons, hundreds of concealed facilities, all working together with clockwork precision to demonstrate humanity's true capabilities." Overlord Vexhay stared at the cascade of reports with growing horror. "The infrastructure damage alone will take decades to repair. Millions of beings will die from the resulting economic collapse." Stone's expression remained impassive. "Then I suggest you accept our terms before the situation deteriorates further. You have 15 hours and 17 minutes remaining." The council chamber erupted in chaos as representatives began shouting at each other, some demanding immediate capitulation while others called for desperate military action. But beneath the noise, Stone could see the calculation taking place. Each species was rapidly assessing their ability to survive humanity's demonstrated capabilities. "Admiral," Commander Park reported quietly, "we're receiving surrender offers from 17 minor species governments. They're requesting immediate cessation of operations in exchange for full compliance with our terms." Stone nodded. The minor species had always been victims rather than perpetrators in the galactic power structure. Accept their surrenders and immediately halt all operations in their territories. Begin humanitarian aid deployment where needed. He reopened the communication channel to address the council chambers directly. "Representatives, as you can see, the situation is rapidly evolving. Species that accept our terms immediately will see an end to hostile operations. Those that continue to resist will face escalating consequences. Prime Mystic Etherlon's crystalline form flickered with resignation, and if the major powers refuse your ultimatum, Stone's answer carried the weight of absolute certainty. Then the galaxy will learn what humans are truly capable of when we stop pretending to be weak. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the pristine corridors of the Hegemony's primary research facility on Zenth Prime, her stolen security credentials giving her access to some of the most classified projects in the galaxy. Around her, Hegemony scientists worked frantically to understand how their primitive human allies had managed to infiltrate and compromise their most secure installations. They had no idea that one of those humans was standing 3 meters away, clipboard in hand, taking detailed notes on their desperate efforts. "Status report from Infiltration Team 7, Elena whispered into her nearly invisible communication implant. "I'm inside their primary military research complex. They're in complete panic. Apparently, they've discovered that their quantum communication array has been compromised for over 60 years. The response crackled in her ear with barely contained satisfaction.
"Copy that, 7. How are they handling the revelation?"
Elena glanced around at the chaos surrounding her. Senior researchers were arguing loudly while junior staff scrambled to implement increasingly desperate security protocols.
Not welcome, Pro.
They're discovering that nearly every major technological advancement they've made in the last century contains human contributions. They're starting to realize the full scope of our penetration. It had taken Elena 23 years to work her way into this position. 23 years of playing the role of a dedicated research assistant, slowly gaining trust and access while secretly documenting every classified project, every military development. She was one of thousands of human agents who had spent decades in deep cover waiting for this moment. A commotion near the main laboratory drew her attention. Through the transparent walls, she could see Overlord Vexhai himself, his 6 arms gesticulating wildly as he demanded answers from terrified scientists. His mandibles were clicking in patterns that Elena recognized as extreme agitation. Control. High-value target confirmed at location. Vexhai is here personally, trying to understand how we've compromised their systems. Excellent. 7. Continue observation. Do not reveal yourself unless absolutely necessary. Elena moved closer to the laboratory, her stolen credentials automatically opening security doors that should have been impenetrable to human agents. Inside, she could see detailed holographic displays showing the extent of human infiltration throughout Hegemony space. The displays were damning. Red markers indicated confirmed human agents and positions throughout the Hegemony hierarchy. Green markers showed technology that contained human-designed components. Blue markers represented facilities that had been compromised or could be remotely disabled. The map was almost entirely red, green, and blue. Impossible, Overlord Vexhai was saying, his translator rendering his agitation into perfectly clear human speech. No species could achieve this level of infiltration without detection. Our security protocols are the most advanced in the galaxy. Chief Researcher Thakmore, an elderly Hegemony scientist whose carapace showed the scars of decades in service, gestured helplessly at the displays. The evidence is undeniable, my lord. The humans have been systematically placing their people and technology throughout our civilization for over a century. They know everything about us. Our military capabilities, our industrial capacity, our strategic plans. Documenting every word of the conversation, this intelligence would be invaluable for the next phase of operations. Overlord Vexhai's compound eyes focused on a particular section of the display. What about our deepest strategic reserves? The hidden fleets, the classified weapon projects, the emergency protocols. Thakmore's response sent visible shudders through Vexhai's exoskeleton. All compromised, my lord. Every single classified project shows evidence of human involvement. The stealth fleet that we've been developing in the outer darkness, The quantum disruptors were designed using human theoretical frameworks. The planet killer weapons, the targeting systems, contain human computational matrices. Elena felt a cold satisfaction at the revelation. Humanity's long-term strategy had been even more successful than most agents realized. They hadn't just infiltrated alien governments, they had shaped alien military development for generations, ensuring that every weapon designed to threaten human worlds contained hidden vulnerabilities.
Sir, another researcher approached Vex-High with obvious reluctance.
We've discovered something else. The humans haven't just infiltrated our current systems. They've been influencing our technological development for over 2 centuries. Vex-A turned all 6 arms toward the researcher in a gesture of complete attention. Explain. The researcher activated a historical analysis display that made Elena struggle to maintain her composure. The screen showed the introduction of key technologies into hegemony society, tracing their origins back through decades of apparent alien development. Every major breakthrough we've achieved in the last 200 years, the researcher explained, can be traced back to theoretical papers published by human scientists, technological samples provided through diplomatic exchanges, or collaborative research projects with human institutions. The implications hit Vex-A like a physical blow. Elena could see his exoskeleton darkening as his internal organs shifted in response to extreme stress. "You're telling me," Vex-A said slowly, "that humans have been guiding our technological development since before we even considered them a significant species?" "Yes, my lord. They've been playing a game that operates on timescales we never imagined. While we thought in terms of years or decades, they've been implementing strategies that span centuries." Elena had to admire the revelation from a professional perspective. Even she hadn't fully understood the scope of humanity's long-term planning. The infiltration operation she was part of was just the final phase of a strategy that had been developing since first contact with alien species. Her communication implant crackled with an urgent message. "All agents, priority update. Phase 3 is beginning ahead of schedule. Repeat, Phase 3 is beginning now." Elena glanced at her chronometer. They still had over 12 hours left on the ultimatum. The acceleration of a timeline could only mean one thing. Some of the major powers had attempted military action against human forces. Around her, the hegemony research facility's alarm systems began wailing. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in threatening red illumination as automated systems detected unauthorized access to classified networks throughout the galaxy. "My lord," a technician called out in panic, "we're detecting massive system intrusions across all secured networks. The humans appear to be accessing our most classified databases simultaneously." Elena smiled grimly. Phase 3 was the information warfare component of humanity's strategy. Having demonstrated their military capabilities and revealed their infiltration network, they were now systematically accessing and downloading the complete records of every major government in the galaxy. Military plans, classified technologies, diplomatic secrets, industrial capabilities, resource reserves, population data, every piece of information that had been carefully guarded by alien governments was being copied and analyzed by human intelligence systems. "Cut all network connections!" Overlord Vex-High commanded. "Isolate every system, activate emergency protocols, implement complete communication blackout." The technicians scrambled to comply, but Elena knew their efforts were futile. The human infiltration was too deep, the compromised systems too numerous. Cutting network connections would only delay the inevitable while crippling their ability to coordinate any response. "My lord," Chief Researcher Talkmore approached Vex-High with obvious terror. "The isolation protocols aren't working. The humans appear to have physical access to our secure facilities. They're not just hacking our systems remotely, they're inside our installations." Elena had to suppress a laugh at the understatement. There were probably more human agents inside hegemony facilities than most alien governments had in their entire intelligence services. Her implant crackled with another update. 7. New priority target. We need real-time intelligence on hegemony military response capabilities. Can you access their war room? Elena glanced around the chaotic research facility, calculating her options. Her security credentials were high-level enough to access most areas, and the current crisis meant that normal security protocols were being bypassed in favor of emergency response procedures. Affirmative control. Moving to Military Command Center now. She slipped out of the research laboratory and made her way through corridors filled with panicking hegemony officials. Her stolen credentials opened every security checkpoint, her carefully practiced demeanor allowing her to blend in with the crisis response teams that were rushing throughout the facility. The Military Command Center was a testament to hegemony paranoia, layers of physical and electronic security that should have made infiltration impossible. Elena walked through all of it with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there, her credentials triggering automatic systems that granted her access to some of the most classified spaces in the galaxy. Inside the command center, she found chaos that exceeded even the research facility. Military commanders were shouting orders while technicians frantically tried to re-establish communications with fleet elements throughout hegemony space. Status report demanded General Korthak, the highest-ranking military officer in the facility. His exoskeleton bore the scars of countless battles, but Elena could see fear in his compound eyes. "Sir," a communications officer reported with barely controlled panic, "we've lost contact with 67% of our fleet elements. The ships that are still responding report cascading system failures across all major platforms." Elena activated her recording system again, documenting every detail of the hegemony's military collapse. The intelligence would help human forces anticipate and counter any desperate actions the aliens might attempt. "What about the reserve fleets?" General Korthak demanded. "The hidden installations, the emergency forces?" The communications officer consulted his displays with growing desperation. "All showing similar patterns, sir. It appears that the human infiltration is even more extensive than we initially calculated. They have access to systems we didn't even know could be compromised." A tactical officer approached with data that made the general's exoskeleton darken with stress. "Sir, we're receiving reports from across the sector. Human forces are taking position around every major installation. They're not attacking, but their positioning suggests they could strike simultaneously at any target of their choosing." Elena felt a professional appreciation for the precision of the operation. Human forces weren't just demonstrating their capability, they were presenting alien governments with an impossible tactical situation. Any attempt to fight would result in immediate retaliation against critical infrastructure, while any attempt to negotiate from a position of strength was impossible when every military asset was under direct threat. General Korthak turned to a display showing the current positions of human fleets throughout the galaxy. The tactical situation was overwhelming. Humanity had achieved strategic dominance through superior intelligence, coordination, and technology. "How is this possible?" the general muttered to himself. "How did they achieve this level of strategic superiority without anyone noticing?" Elena knew the answer, though she couldn't share it. Humanity had achieved strategic dominance by thinking on timescales that alien species couldn't comprehend. While alien governments planned in terms of years or decades, humanity had been implementing a strategy that spanned centuries. Her implant crackled with another update. "All agents, Phase 4 is now active. Begin systematic documentation of target government decision-making processes. We need real-time intelligence on their response to the ultimatum." Phase 4 was the psychological warfare component of humanity's strategy. Having demonstrated military superiority and achieved information dominance, they were now documenting how alien governments made decisions under extreme pressure. The intelligence would be invaluable for future negotiations and conflict resolution. General Korthak was receiving a steady stream of reports that painted an increasingly desperate picture. Military installations throughout hegemony space were reporting similar patterns of system compromise and fleet positioning. The scale of human coordination was beyond anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. "Sir," a young officer approached with obvious reluctance, "we're receiving reports that several minor species have already accepted the human ultimatum. They're requesting immediate cessation of hostile activities in exchange for compliance with all terms. the general's mandibles clicked in patterns that Elena recognized as extreme frustration. Which species? The Etherian Collective, the Crystalline Confederation, the Void Wanderers, and 16 others, sir. They're all reporting immediate cessation of human operations in their territories following their surrender. Elena felt a moment of satisfaction at the news. The minor species had always been victims rather than perpetrators in the galactic power structure. Their quick surrender would minimize civilian casualties while demonstrating to the major powers that cooperation was possible. What about the major powers? General Korthak demanded. The Corvin clans, the Serpentine Collective, the Blood Legion? The officer consulted his displays with growing concern. All still refusing the ultimatum, sir. However, they're all reporting similar levels of infiltration and system compromise. It appears that the human operation was truly galaxy-wide in scope. General Korthak studied the tactical displays with the grim focus of a career military officer facing an impossible situation. Elena could see him calculating options, analyzing possibilities, searching for some way to mount an effective response. Sir, another officer approached with data that would eliminate any remaining hope. Intelligence analysis confirms that the humans have achieved complete information dominance. They know the location and capabilities of every military asset we possess, while we have minimal intelligence on their true strength. The revelation that humanity had achieved complete information dominance was perhaps more devastating than their military demonstrations. In warfare, information was often more valuable than weapons, and the humans had systematically denied their enemies the most basic intelligence while accumulating comprehensive knowledge of alien capabilities. Elena's implant crackled with a priority message that made her tense with anticipation. All agents, prepare for possible extraction. Several target governments are showing signs of planning desperate military action. Be ready to evacuate on short notice. The warning was ominous. Desperate governments might attempt actions that would force humanity to escalate beyond demonstrations and surgical strikes. Elena began calculating her evacuation routes while continuing to document the hegemony's decision-making process. General Korthak was conferring with his senior staff, their voices low but their body language betraying extreme agitation. Elena activated her directional recording system, capturing their conversation despite the attempts at privacy. The situation is impossible, the general was saying. The humans have achieved complete strategic dominance through methods we never anticipated. Traditional military responses are useless when every weapon system contains compromised components. His chief of staff, an elderly hegemony officer named Veltar, gestured helplessly at the tactical displays. Our only option may be to activate the final protocol, sir. Human intelligence had identified references to such contingencies in several alien governments, but the details remained classified at the highest levels. Explain the final protocol, General Korthak commanded. Veltar's exoskeleton darkened with reluctance. Complete sterilization of contested zones, sir. If we cannot defend our territories through conventional means, we deny them to the enemy through total destruction. The implications were staggering. The final protocol appeared to be a scorched earth strategy that would render entire star systems uninhabitable rather than allow them to fall under human control. Elena immediately activated her emergency communications system, broadcasting a priority alert to all human forces. Control, urgent intelligence. Target government is discussing activation of final protocol. Appears to be systematic destruction of contested territories. Recommend immediate escalation to prevent civilian casualties. Copy that 7. All agents initiate immediate extraction procedures. Phase 5 is now active. Elena knew that Phase 5 was humanity's final escalation, direct action to prevent civilian casualties by removing the ability of alien governments to implement desperate measures. She began moving toward her predetermined extraction point while continuing to monitor the military command center. Around her, alarms were wailing as hegemony forces detected the beginning of human extraction operations throughout their territory. The careful infiltration that had taken decades to establish was being revealed and abandoned in a matter of hours. "Sir?" a technician called out in panic. We're detecting massive communication spikes throughout our territory. It appears that the human infiltrators are activating emergency protocols. General Korthak turned to stare at Elena, and for a moment she thought her cover had been blown. But his compound eyes looked through her rather than at her. His attention focused on threats he couldn't see rather than the enemy agents standing 10 meters away. "Activate the final protocol," he commanded with the finality of absolute desperation. "If we cannot save our civilization, we will not allow it to be conquered." Elena's extraction beacon began pulsing, indicating that her evacuation window was opening. She began moving toward the exit while recording the general's final orders, her mind calculating the implications of what was about to unfold. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans stopped being patient and started being thorough. And Elena suspected that the lesson would be written in fire across the stars. Captain James Harrison materialized on the bridge of the terminus, his extraction from the Corvin homeworld having taken place just minutes before the planet's military leadership activated their version of the final protocol. Around him, the most advanced human warship ever constructed hummed with barely contained power, its weapons systems charging for what might become the most decisive battle in galactic history. "Captain," reported Commander Lisa Park from the tactical station, "we've successfully extracted all deep cover agents from Corvin space. Dr. Vasquez and her team from the Hegemony are aboard the Retribution, all personnel accounted for." Harrison nodded grimly as he studied the holographic display showing the current tactical situation. The galaxy had been divided into zones of control, with human forces positioned to strike at critical infrastructure while alien governments frantically attempted to implement their most desperate strategies. "Status on the final protocols?" Harrison asked, though he dreaded the answer. Commander Park's expression was grave as she consulted her displays. 7 major governments have activated various versions, sir. The Hegemony is preparing to sterilize 12 star systems rather than allow them to fall under human control. The Corvin clans are charging their stellar disruptors to collapse suns in contested territories. The Blood Legion is preparing biological weapons that could render entire worlds uninhabitable for centuries. The scale of potential destruction was staggering. Rather than accept defeat, the major alien powers were preparing to destroy billions of lives and countless worlds rather than submit to human authority. Estimated civilian casualties if the final protocols are implemented? Harrison asked, though he already knew the answer would be devastating. Conservative estimate: 42 billion sentient beings across 17 star systems, Commander Park reported with professional detachment that didn't hide her horror at the numbers. That's assuming the destruction is limited to their primary targets. If the stellar disruptions cascade or the biological agents spread beyond intended zones, the casualties could reach into the hundreds of billions. This was exactly what humanity had hoped to avoid. A situation where victory could only be achieved at the cost of unimaginable civilian suffering. "Communications," Harrison addressed Lieutenant Commander Nash. "Patch me through to Admiral Stone and the fleet commanders. Priority Alpha authorization." Within seconds, the images of human fleet commanders throughout the galaxy appeared on the main screen. Admiral Stone on the Retribution, Captain Torres on the Shadow, and dozens of others who had spent decades preparing for this moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "the situation has escalated beyond our worst-case scenarios. Multiple alien governments have activated final protocols designed to deny us control of their territories through systematic destruction." The faces of the fleet commanders showed no surprise. They had all received the same intelligence reports and understood the implications. Admiral Stone spoke first, his weathered features showing the strain of command during humanity's darkest hour. "What are your recommendations, Captain? We can prevent most of the final protocols through direct military action, but the cost in alien lives will be enormous." Harrison had been wrestling with this decision since the first intelligence reports reached him. "That's exactly what we need to discuss. We have the capability to prevent these acts of desperation, but doing so will require us to abandon our commitment to minimizing civilian casualties. Captain Torres leaned forward, her image flickering slightly due to her ship's stealth systems. Sir, with respect, allowing the final protocols to proceed will result in far greater civilian casualties than stopping them. We're talking about the systematic destruction of entire civilizations. The moral calculus was brutal but clear. Humanity could save billions of lives by taking direct action against alien governments, but doing so would require them to become the aggressors they had always refused to be. There is another option, said Captain Reynolds of the exploration vessel Discovery. We could accelerate our timeline and force immediate surrender through overwhelming demonstration of force. Harrison considered the suggestion carefully. Explain your proposal, Captain. Instead of surgical strikes against military targets, we implement simultaneous infrastructure disruption across all major alien territories. We show them that we can collapse their entire civilization in a matter of hours, making resistance pointless. The strategy was sound from a military perspective, but Harrison could see the ethical implications. That would still result in massive civilian casualties as infrastructure collapse leads to social chaos. Less than the final protocols would cause, and it would end the conflict definitively rather than prolonging the suffering. Harrison found himself facing the same impossible choice that had plagued humanity for 3 centuries. How do you defeat an enemy without becoming the monster they claim you are? His contemplation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the bridge crew. Captain, reported Commander Park, we're receiving priority transmission from the Galactic Council chambers. They're requesting immediate communication with human leadership. They still had 8 hours remaining on the ultimatum, but the activation of final protocols had accelerated everything. On screen, Commander. The chaos of the council chambers filled the main display, but this time the alien representatives looked different. Fear had replaced arrogance, and several species delegations were showing signs of complete panic. Ambassador Sarah Chen materialized on a secondary screen, her image transmitted from the human embassy ship positioned near Nexus Prime. Captain Harrison, the Council is prepared to negotiate. Negotiate? Harrison's voice carried a dangerous edge. They're implementing final protocols designed to kill billions of civilians rather than accept our terms. What exactly do they think there is to negotiate? Overlord Vexahay stepped forward, his 6 arms trembling with barely controlled fear. Human Commander, we have reconsidered our position. The scale of your infiltration and military capabilities was underestimated. We are prepared to discuss modified terms. Harrison felt a cold fury building in his chest. Modified terms? You're preparing to commit genocide on a scale that dwarfs anything in galactic history, and you want to negotiate modified terms. Premistic Etherlon's crystalline form flickered with patterns of desperate urgency. Please, human leader, you must understand our position. Complete capitulation to your demands would mean the end of our civilizations as we know them. We are trying to find a middle ground. There is no middle ground, Harrison replied with absolute finality. Your governments have demonstrated that they cannot be trusted with military capability. You've proven that you will resort to genocide rather than accept defeat. There are no modified terms. Admiral Kretak of the Void Hunters appeared on the transmission, his scaled features showing the strain of a military commander facing an impossible situation. Then what do you propose, human? You cannot expect entire civilizations to simply surrender their sovereignty without resistance. Harrison considered the question carefully before responding. What we propose is what we've always proposed, a galaxy where human beings can live without fear of being murdered, enslaved, or sold as entertainment. The methods required to achieve that goal are entirely up to you. Representative Slathara coiled tighter as the implications became clear. You offer us the choice between surrender and extinction. We offer you the choice between coexistence and consequences, Harrison corrected. You've had 3 centuries to choose coexistence. You've consistently chosen to exploit our peaceful nature instead. The consequences are now inevitable. Ambassador Chen's image flickered as she received a priority communication. Captain, I'm receiving reports that several alien governments are accelerating their final protocol timelines. They appear to be preparing for immediate implementation. Harrison felt time running out. The alien governments were calling humanity's bluff, betting that humans wouldn't be willing to prevent genocide through military action. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. All fleet commanders, Harrison addressed the assembled human leadership, implement Operation Final Judgment. All final protocols are to be prevented through direct military intervention. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Any force attempting to implement civilian destruction is to be stopped by any means necessary. The orders sent shockwaves through the assembled commanders. Operation Final Judgment was humanity's ultimate contingency, total war against any force that threatened civilian populations, regardless of the cost in alien lives. Admiral Stone's image showed grim determination. Confirmed, Captain. All fleets are moving to intercept final protocol implementations. Estimated time to prevent all known threats, 47 minutes. Fleets that had been positioned for surgical strikes suddenly accelerated to combat velocity, their formations optimizing for maximum destructive capability. The careful restraint that had characterized human operations was being abandoned in favor of absolute military supremacy. Captain, Commander Park reported with barely controlled excitement, we're receiving surrender transmissions from multiple alien governments. They're detecting our fleet movements and requesting immediate cessation of final protocol prevention operations. Harrison felt a moment of savage satisfaction. The alien governments had finally understood the true scope of human military capability. When pushed beyond endurance, humanity didn't just wage war, they waged extinction with precision that made their previous restraint seem miraculous.
Tell them it's too late for surrender, Harrison replied coldly.
They activated final protocols designed to commit genocide rather than accept reasonable terms. They will face the consequences of that decision. On the main screen, the chaos in the council chambers had reached new levels of panic. Representatives were shouting at each other while their governments frantically tried to deactivate weapon systems that human forces were already moving to destroy. Overlord Vexehi's mandibles were clicking in patterns that the translation system rendered as desperate pleading. Human Commander, we will accept your original terms. Complete acceptance, no modifications, no conditions. Your acceptance is noted, Harrison replied with deadly calm. But the final protocols have already been activated. We cannot allow weapons capable of genocide to remain in the hands of governments that have proven willing to use them. The truth was more complex than Harrison revealed. Humanity's ultimate goal had never been simple conquest. It had been the permanent elimination of threats to human survival. The final protocols provided the perfect justification for dismantling alien military capabilities entirely. Admiral Stone's image flickered as his ship engaged enemy forces defending a stellar disruptor facility. Captain, we're encountering heavy resistance at multiple targets. Alien forces are attempting to complete their final protocols before we can intervene.
Continue operations, Admiral. All final protocol facilities are to be neutralized regardless of defensive strength.
The battle reports that followed painted a picture of warfare unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human forces, freed from the constraints of minimizing casualties, displayed military capabilities that made their previous demonstrations look like gentle warnings. Stellar disruptors that had taken decades to construct were destroyed in minutes. Biological weapon facilities that had been considered impregnable were breached and sterilized with ruthless efficiency. Entire fleets that had served as the backbone of alien military power were eliminated with precision that spoke of intimate knowledge of their weaknesses. Captain? Commander Park reported with awe in her voice. Final tally from Operation Final Judgment. All final protocol facilities neutralized. Estimated alien military losses, 60 to 7% of total galactic combat capability destroyed or captured. The scale of destruction was staggering. In less than 2 hours, humanity had dismantled the military infrastructure that alien civilizations had built over millennia. The demonstration of force was so overwhelming that resistance became not just futile but inconceivable. On the main screen, the council chambers had fallen into stunned silence. The alien representatives stared at tactical displays showing the complete collapse of their military capabilities with expressions of shock that transcended species barriers. "It's over," whispered Prime Mystic Ether Lawn, his crystalline form dim with defeat. "They've destroyed everything. Our fleets, our weapons, our defenses, all of it gone in a matter of hours." Harrison addressed the council with the finality of absolute victory. "Representatives of the former Galactic Council, your government's decision to implement final protocols has resulted in the permanent neutralization of your military capabilities. You are no longer able to threaten human populations or implement genocide against your own people." Overlord Vexhi's exoskeleton had darkened to almost black, a physiological response to extreme stress. "What happens now, human? You have destroyed our ability to defend ourselves. Do you plan to rule over the wreckage of our civilizations?" Harrison considered the question carefully. "We plan to ensure that no human being ever again faces the threat of slavery, murder, or exploitation by alien forces. How your civilizations rebuild is entirely up to you as long as they remain incapable of threatening ours." The implications were clear. Humanity would not rule the galaxy. They would simply ensure that no one else could threaten them. It was a form of hegemony based on defensive supremacy rather than territorial conquest. "The terms remain the same," Harrison continued. "Recognition of human sovereignty, cessation of all hostile activities against human populations, return of all human slaves, and payment of reparations for past attacks. The difference is that you no longer have the option of refusing." Ambassador Chen's image flickered as she received updated intelligence. "Captain, we're receiving acceptance confirmations from all major governments. Full compliance with all terms, no conditions, no exceptions." "Confirmed, Ambassador. Begin Phase 6 humanitarian aid and reconstruction assistance. We are no longer at war." Phase 6 was humanity's final demonstration, showing that their goal had never been conquest or revenge, but simply the safety of their own people. Human ships that had been weapons of war would now become instruments of mercy, helping to rebuild the civilizations they had been forced to disable. The galaxy would survive, but it would never again underestimate the species that had given it 3 centuries of fair warning before running out of patience. 5 years had passed since Operation Final Judgment, and the galaxy had settled into a new equilibrium that few had imagined possible. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked through the rebuilt corridors of the Galactic Council chambers, noting how different the atmosphere had become. Where once there had been arrogance and dismissal, now there was respectful cooperation and genuine dialogue. The chambers themselves reflected the changes. The imposing thrones and elevated platforms that had symbolized alien superiority had been replaced with a circular arrangement that emphasized equality. Representatives sat at the same level, their voices carrying equal weight in deliberations that actually sought solutions rather than dominance. "Ambassador Chen," called out Prime Mystic Atherlon, his crystalline form now pulsing with patterns of genuine warmth rather than condescension. "The morning session is about to begin. Are you ready to present the human perspective on the Outer Rim Development Project?" Sarah smiled, remembering how different these interactions had been just years ago. "Ready, Mystic. I think you'll find our proposals quite reasonable. The transformation in galactic politics had been remarkable to witness. Species that had once viewed cooperation as weakness now competed to contribute to joint projects. Governments that had prioritized military expansion now focused on infrastructure development and civilian welfare. The change hadn't been imposed by human force, it had emerged naturally once the threat of violence was removed from political calculations. As the session began, Sarah listened to reports from across the galaxy that painted a picture of unprecedented cooperation and prosperity. The hegemony had redirected their industrial capacity from weapon production to terraforming technologies. The Corvin clans had transformed from raiders into explorers, pushing into uncharted territories that promised resources for everyone. Even the Blood Legion had found purpose in establishing security protocols that protected civilian populations rather than exploiting them. The reconstruction of the Zenth system is proceeding ahead of schedule, reported Administrator Tackmore, the former military researcher who had become one of the most effective civilian coordinators in the galaxy. Human engineering assistance has allowed us to complete atmospheric processing in half the projected time. The Zenth system had been one of the casualties of the final protocol crisis, a star system that the hegemony had begun to sterilize before human intervention prevented the genocide. The reconstruction effort had become a symbol of what could be achieved through cooperation rather than conflict. Human technical teams report that the new atmospheric processors are operating at 112% of designed efficiency. The modifications suggested by hegemony scientists have proven remarkably effective. The integration of human and alien technologies had produced innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. Human precision engineering combined with alien theoretical frameworks was creating solutions to problems that had plagued civilizations for millennia. Overlord Vekshai, whose title had evolved from military commander to civilian administrator, gestured with his 6 arms in patterns that now conveyed enthusiasm rather than threat. The agricultural development on New Genesis is showing similar success. The Etherean growing techniques combined with human soil management have increased yield by over 300%. New Genesis had been established as a joint colony, bringing together refugees from species that had suffered during the final protocol crisis. The world had become a testament to what could be achieved when different species worked together toward common goals, rather than fighting over scarce resources. Admiral Kratak, now leading the combined exploration fleet rather than the combined battle fleet, provided updates on their latest discoveries. The expedition to the distant spiral has confirmed the existence of habitable worlds far beyond our previous exploration range. Initial surveys suggest resources sufficient to support billions of colonists from all species. The shift from military to exploration focus had opened possibilities that had been unimaginable during the era of constant conflict. Species that had once fought over territory now worked together to map and develop new frontiers that promised abundance for everyone. Speaking of exploration, Sarah interjected, I have an announcement that I think will interest everyone. The Human Science Consortium has completed development of the new faster-than-light communication system. We are prepared to share the technology with all member species. The chamber buzzed with excitement at the announcement. Faster-than-light communication had been one of humanity's most closely guarded technologies, the foundation of their tactical superiority during the conflict. Sharing it represented a level of trust that demonstrated how completely relationships had changed. Representative Slithera, whose serpentine form now coiled in patterns of gratitude rather than hostility, raised a question that was on everyone's minds. The communication technology was crucial to your victory during the conflict. Are you certain about sharing such strategic capabilities? Sarah nodded with confidence that surprised even herself. We're certain. The strategic environment has changed fundamentally. When everyone can communicate instantly across galactic distances, conflicts become easier to resolve before they escalate to violence. Shared communication capability makes everyone safer. The philosophy reflected humanity's evolved approach to galactic politics. Rather than maintaining superiority through technological advantage, they were creating security through technological interdependence